Hey guys, welcome to Y&R Daily News YouTube channel. Today's topics: Y&R Spoilers reveal a storm of drama is brewing in Genoa City as the pieces surrounding Claire, Audra, and Holden suddenly lock together in ways no one expected. The rumor that Claire and Audra might be pregnant at the same time is more than just a small spark in their personal lives. It's a slow-burning mine buried deep within the fragile boundaries between personal feelings and corporate power. In the maelstrom, Holden is thrust into the role of troublemaker, a position both alluring and dangerous, where each decision not only determines the future of three people, but can also have consequences that extend beyond the realm of love, spreading to Joe Newman and the shaky alliances that thrive on secrets and silence. Claire Newman, despite her attempts to dust off a heart that has always been devoted to Kyle Abbott, cannot deny that memories and emotional inertia are things that cannot be broken by turning away. Kyle is the shadow of a possible choice to make, a small chance for Claire to prove that the past need not be a death sentence for the future. But then, Holden Novak appears as the escape Claire thinks she needs. Not because she wants to fill the void with someone, but because Holden somehow makes Claire believe she deserves a new start. The trip to Los Angeles with Holden becomes a turning point. Their slow pace suddenly speeds up. The line between companionship and commitment blurs, and Holden's confession of love turns every test into a fait accompli. What Claire doesn't expect is that this trajectory hits the exact moment Audrey Charles also returns to the vortex, bringing with her shady connections to Holden from her Los Angeles past and rumors that she may be pregnant. The terrifying symmetry of the two tests at the same time scenario forces everyone involved to look at what they'd been avoiding for so long. Responsibility. For Claire, responsibility is a question about herself. If she becomes pregnant, will it be a ladder that will help her escape the darkness Jordan imposed on her youth, or a new rope that binds her to old judgments? No matter how hard Claire tries to forget, she cannot erase the fact that she was born and raised in a sophisticated, tyrannical structure where love is stripped, trust is exploited, and every gentle gesture is conditional. Pregnancy for her is not simply a step into a new role. It is a re-examination of her entire value system, a test to see if she can stop the toxic chain of control and manipulation. If Holden is the father, Claire must face the shadow of his shady dealings with Audra. If Kyle is accidentally drawn back, her heart must answer the question it has been avoiding for so long. Is love a courageous choice, or just a habit of returning to a place that used to be warm? For Audra, responsibility takes the form of strategy. She's lived in a world where emotions are often the tool and results are the goal. The possibility of her pregnancy opens a new front between the need to control the narrative and the cold biological truth of a DNA test. Audra knows better than anyone that the public craves drama. And a shrewd businesswoman, pregnant in the middle of an emotional triangle, is enough to sway negotiations, to shift the balance of the board. But she also knows the consequences. If Holden is the father, she must accept sharing the center of the story with a man who is not necessarily hers. If the speculation turns to Kyle, she faces a backlash from both the Abbotts and the Newmans. Audra is good at taking chances, but pregnancy is not a business. It requires a kind of courage she rarely needs. Admitting her fears, being honest with herself, and accepting that some moves can't go both ways. Holden, who is expected to fix the problem, faces an inherent contradiction. He is both the cause and the one tasked with putting it out. Holden's past is not clean, but it is not one-sidedly black either. His dealings with Audra may be the result of a period when he sacrificed his principles to survive. The price of standing in the centers of power in Los Angeles, where success means understanding the unspoken rules of silence. Admitting his feelings to Claire changes him. He begins to want to do the right thing, to cut the tangled strings that are pulling everything back. But life rarely gives a chance to do it again without someone paying a price. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. If both Claire and Audra are pregnant, or just one of them, Holden still has to be open, transparent, willing to take tests, willing to take responsibility, not just physically, but emotionally, showing up when needed, staying silent when his presence only makes wounds bleed, and knowing when to apologize to stop pointless fights. Behind the personal life is the corporate chessboard. Any turmoil involving Claire, who despite her efforts to redeem herself, has been labelled by the media as Jordan's past, is a media risk for Newman. Nikki and Victoria understand that if the family story is exposed, it will allow rivals to rehash old scars, dragging Newman into a negative emotional zone where public opinion is hard to distinguish between truth and falsehood. Zhao is not immune. Kyle, even if he chooses to stay out of the picture, is still the focus of a scandal-sensitive community. Jack and Diane must calculate, protect their son, or protect the reputation of the corporation. Audrey's presence in the eye of the storm puts the negotiated deals at Newman Media at risk of falling apart as partners fear prolonged crisis. A leak of the pregnancy triangle could be enough to shake stock prices, fuel speculation about restructuring, and force otherwise neutral people to choose sides. Tactically, the adults in this story are forced to establish a safety protocol before emotions take over: medical confidentiality, consistent one-way lines of communication, agreed-upon boundaries to protect the pregnant woman from public pressure, and finally, a DNA testing process overseen by a trusted third party. A clear schedule will temper toxic speculation. Timing of the exam, the extent of information shared, when the results will be announced, who gets to know first. All of it needs to be written down, signed, and respected as a contract. If Holden had proactively offered to shoulder the costs and pledged not to withhold any professional psychological support for both Claire and Audra, he would have set a good precedent. Responsibility isn't just demonstrated through press conferences or nice-sounding words. It starts with small, consistent actions. Of course, the real drama of a TV story lies not in the DNA results, but in how each character changes along the way. For Claire, this journey is a test of whether she can use old wounds as experiences to protect a new life, rather than letting them turn into reasons for repeated emotional violence. She may seek therapy, learn to cut off the psychological triggers Jordan planted, and practice putting her need for safety before her need to be loved properly. She needs to learn to love herself as a mother before loving any man, because only then will she be strong enough to navigate the stormy days ahead. For Audra, this event may be her last chance to redefine ambition. If the baby is hers, true power comes not from leveraging information, but from putting the well-being of her child before any short-term gain. When a woman who was once the best negotiator begins to negotiate to give more security to an unborn being, it is a sign of maturity. Holden, in the center of the vortex of responsibility, needs a symbolic act strong enough to break the suspicion, publicly severing all shady ties to his Los Angeles past, handing over documents to a lawyer, being willing to answer difficult questions before an independent commission if there is one, and especially not using the media to clean his image by denying his ex. If he looks straight at his mistake and cleans it up, he will not only create a healthy space for any child to come, but also prove to himself that happiness cannot be built on a pedestal of lies. That is the only way he will have to settle, not with half-hearted compromises, but with a radical change. What scenario for the next episode? If the DNA results confirm Claire is pregnant with Holden's child, Their relationship will enter a period of restructuring, less adventure, more discipline, less promises, more doctor visits, less loud romance, more quiet commitment. Kay will be forced to step back from the emotional orbit, at least for a while, to allow Claire and Holden to build a circle of safety. If the baby is Kyle's, the story turns into a difficult family dialogue. The Abbotts must protect Kyle from the temptation to become aggressively defensive, and the Newmans must prevent the media from turning Claire into a symbol of her dark past. In the case of Audra being pregnant with Holden's child, the line between work and personal life will become so thin that one wrong move could send all three into the rumor mill. And if the most ironic scenario occurs, Claire and Audra both become pregnant, Genoa City will see a year in which the concept of adult is redefined by how calm they remain in the face of the temptation to retaliate. Will the upcoming scandals change Claire's fate? The answer, paradoxically, lies not in the scandals themselves, but in how Claire handles them. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. Fate is not a netcast outside of her will. It is a series of repeated decisions made in the midst of chaos. If Claire chooses transparency over avoidance, healing over concealment, and building a serious support system for herself, she will move out of the victim of Jordan box and become the one who sets the new rules of her own life. If Audra, for once, chooses to soften her ways and prioritize what is right over what is convenient, she will break the stereotype of the business queen that is so easily stereotyped. And if Holden proves that responsibility is a daily habit, not a momentary impulse, then all the scandals, no matter how loud, are just noise on the road to a more mature order. In the end, Genoa City is always a place where truth is jostled between interest and emotion, but it is also a place where people who have gone astray are given a second chance. The trip to Los Angeles pushes Claire and Holden to the climax, while Audrey's Los Angeles past pulls them into the maelstrom. Between these two opposing forces, each will have to learn to stand firm to support a life that may be coming. And in the moment the dry test results are opened, what defines them will not be the name printed on the father or mother line, but how they hold hands or know when to let go, so that the child, whoever it is born into a world less dark than the one that molded its parents. At that point, scandal will no longer be Claire's destiny. It will just be the final chapter of an old book, close to make way for a new story of her own to write. The story of Kyle, Audra, Claire, and the powerful giants like Victor and Cain is gradually emerging, not as a simple emotional line, but a maze drawn by ambition, pride, and tests that push people to their limits. The key lies in what seems obvious. Kyle never loved Audra. That is not an excuse for his subsequent mistakes, but a starting point to see why his every step gradually slipped off the original orbit, and why Audra on the opposite side misread the signal to the point of turning a misunderstanding into a spear of revenge. From the moment Victor Newman began to test Kyle, the fates of both seemed to be entangled. One side was the old man, always believing that pressure was the fastest tool to reveal the nature. On the other side was an heir who was trained to receive rather than create, who often reacted by proving his competence rather than by asking the right questions. Victor saw in Kyle an interesting mix, smart enough to understand the rules of the game, immature enough to be carried away by the feeling that he was in charge. It was in this gap between understanding and misunderstanding that Kyle agreed to enter the Glackade bet, an adventure dressed in strategy, but actually a test of character. Glackade offered nothing of value to Kyle or Audra, because they had both entered it with conflicting expectations from the start. For Kyle, it was a way to prove himself. If he succeeded, he would distance himself from the shadow of Jabo and the scrutiny of his influential fathers and uncles. If he failed, he would still have the familiar escape route home. For Audra, Glackade was image leverage, political credit in exchange for status among those who held the power stakes. A personal transactional relationship between them emerged as an unnamed addendum to the contract. For Kyle, it was a vague social handshake. For Audra, it was a code to trigger private expectations she thought were discreetly reciprocated. When Kyle Cooley left the addendum, Audra suddenly realized that what was taken away was not just a fling, but a feeling of being despised and ignored. That hurt, which people like Audra have spent years practicing to brush off, cling to her, turning into a relentless journey of revenge. Re-examining each transaction, probing each crack in the opponent's heart, and most importantly, manipulating public opinion until Kyle's image appeared exactly the way she wanted. But a game of chess is never just two players. Victor Mustache doesn't see Kyle cheating on Claire, but he quickly reads the ripple effects of a series of missteps from Glackade. From the media trail, from Kyle being pulled from the comfort zone of reason and into the zone of narcissism. In Victor's eyes, the danger isn't a kiss or a stray night, but that uncertainty pushes the Erin character, Claire, in the context of the new relationships that are emerging onto a different trajectory, one where she can find stability that Kyle can no longer guarantee. Victor is half right here. The negative consequences are real and they push Claire away from Kyle, but he misses the other half, Holden. Holden Novak quietly emerges as a good listener at the right time. For Claire, who has grown accustomed to living under Jordan's dark legacy, Holden brings back something she thought she had lost. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. The feeling of being seen as an individual, not just a chapter in the Newman family psychological files. When Claire agrees to go to Los Angeles with Holden, it's not a hasty escape from the past, but a controlled test, leaving the old context, observing herself in a different way of life, seeing if the new person is resilient enough to stand firm without returning to the safe markers. Ironically, the moment Claire begins to believe in the new trajectory, the secret explodes. Holden has been working for Kane Ashby all along. This detail is devastating because it touches on Claire's deepest fear, being used as a pawn. Kane is no stranger to power struggles. The way he works his deals always involves thorns, the intricate web of connections that make it difficult for opponents to pull out without getting cut. If Holden is a link in that structure, the question immediately arises, is he a willing conduit for escape or a sugar-coated agent planted in Claire's life? When this truth comes out, it not only affects Claire emotionally, but also distorts the political boundaries between Newman Jabao and the middlemen. In that picture, Kay becomes both blameworthy and pitiful. Blameable because he underestimated the psychological consequences of a transactional relationship just when he was being tested. Pitiful because he failed to foresee that a series of private mistakes would be amplified into business, leveraged by veteran players. Since Glackade's failure, Kyle has been under pressure from all sides. Jack needs him to stay steadfast so Zhao doesn't get screwed. Diane wants him to be clean so his family doesn't become a topic of discussion. And the shareholder community reads his every public appearance through the prism of, is he a risk or an asset? The tentative answer leans toward the former, in part because Audra, in a subtle way, keeps the story alive. Every time the press starts to forget, a close source leaks a half-truthful detail enough to remind everyone that the fire is still burning. For Audra, the revenge is more than just emotional. It unravels into strategy. She pushes Kyle into reactive situations. The more reactive he is, the more vulnerable he becomes. She sets media traps with sensitive timing. Every time Zhao enters a negotiation, a rumor pops up. She keeps enough connections with the forces around Newman Media to keep the story varied, avoiding feeling stale. But even as she reaches the pinnacle of manipulation, Audra also reaches a dangerous edge. Every victory she has requires a specific opponent, And when that opponent begins to free fall, the game loses its tension, leaving her feeling empty. It's then that Audrey's true self faces a question she rarely asks herself. Does she want to destroy Kyle? Or does she want him to be strong enough to look back and admit he was wrong? If it's the latter, then revenge is just a roundabout way to get the apology she deserves. Victor, who thought he had the reins from the beginning, was surprised by the Holden-Kane variable, because he had thought that Kyle was weak in character, but strong in morality. If pushed properly, this young man would grow up. The fact that Holden had worked for Kane forced him to redraw the risk map. Kyle might no longer be the main threat. Instead, the dangerous leakage channel lay in the Kane-Holden alliance, intertwined with Claire's private life. Once the Newmans had to deal with a multi-layered crisis, their daughter was threatened emotionally. Their brand equity was attacked in terms of trust. Victor would be forced to change his strategy, from forcing Kyle to reveal to protecting Claire to close the loop. In that new arrangement, he needed to verify how many ties Holden still had with Kane, what data from Newman might have leaked through the human channel, and whether his trial by fire had inadvertently created an opening for his opponent. If these steps are taken, the ultimate question, will the coming scandals change Claire's fate, will have a more optimistic answer than one might expect. Change is certain, but the direction of change depends on whether Claire can translate her newfound sobriety with Holden into self-mastery. The fact that Holden once worked for Kane doesn't destroy the value of the relationship if it's accompanied by complete transparency, honest admission, and a series of actions to break old ties. If Holden can do this, Claire can stand firm without falling back into the dark realm of doubt and obsession. If not, this shock will be Claire's final time learning to choose herself over others. Kyle, in the final picture, is forced to grow up in the least glamorous way. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. Taking responsibility, not a press conference style responsibility, but a daily responsibility. Apologize to the right people. Avoid the temptation to prove it with noise. Focus on rebuilding professional credibility with small but measurable tasks. The chance to get back on track is still there, provided he admits that never loving Audra does not excuse hurting others. That admission, if sincere enough, will cut off the energy that feeds Audra's revenge journey, and also send the right message to Claire. He respects her emotional boundaries, whatever the outcome of their relationship. Audra, if she wants her story to not end in loneliness, can stop as soon as she realizes she's overplayed her hand. She's always been good at reading context. It's time for her to read herself. What has revenge brought her beyond a short-term dopamine hit? If the real goal is a stable seat of power, a network of trusted allies, and an unblemished personal life, the best way is to stop the leaks, close the closed channels, and prove your worth with a few projects that work, not just those that can be destroyed. Genoa City always rewards those who know when to stop, especially those who have the courage to say, "I am hurt," instead of, "I must take revenge." For Victor, the biggest lesson may lie in the limits of trials. Trials by fire can reveal true character, but they can also burn bridges needed for the future. When a trial leads to a butterfly effect that pushes Claire, an already wounded person, over the edge once more, it is time for the plotter to question himself. The real power of Mustache lies not in his ability to push others to the wall, but in knowing when to loosen the rope, protect his family, and absolutely not open the door for other Kanes to sneak in through emotional cracks. The transactional relationship between Kyle and Audra is the bait, but not the bomb. The real bomb lies in how each person handles the pain after the illusion is broken. If Kyle chooses to grow up, Audrey chooses closure, Claire chooses herself, and Holden chooses transparency. The scandal will just be a noisy chapter before the story returns to a decent orbit. But if someone continues to choose to push the story with psychological attacks and hidden calculations, Genoa City will have another storm season, when not only the company's reputation is threatened, but a woman named Claire's heart is once again weighed on the scales of adults. And that is the tragedy that those who truly care about her must avoid repeating at all costs. Subscribe to our channel to update the latest news. Subscribe our channel for more latest updates.